Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Cricket Paper podcast. Now the dust has settled on the epic England-India Test series. We'll be beginning to analyse how both England and Australia are shaping up ahead of their highly anticipated Ashes series, which gets underway in just under 100 days' time. Today, Mohan and myself will start by discussing the top order for both sides before moving on to the engine room and the bowling attacks in the coming weeks, where we'll also take a look at how the white ball squads are shaping up ahead of the September series against South Africa and Ireland. In addition to Ashes build-up, we're also well into the 100 season now, so it's only right really to touch upon that. The competition now well underway as we're reaching the halfway point. And I think, regardless of people's opinions on it, I think if we focus on the field, I think over the last couple of days, Mohan, we've seen some real entertaining games that have gone to the wire, and we're seeing what I think I'd say a more competitively balanced season, which hasn't always been the case in recent years.
Yeah, and I think it's especially exciting knowing that, England's, because I've been sort of viewing the 100 as sort of like the breeding ground for players to be picked for this new white ball era, under Harry Brook. And I think, like you said, there's been a lot of competitive cricket in the last week in the 100. A lot of young players sort of showing what they're made of. I know we're going to pick out a couple in just a moment. But even some old timers as well. Again, with Johnny Bairstow sort of making some comments in the week as well. It's sort of been a good platform to sort of stake your claim as an England white ball player. Given that sort of the white ball team, the national team, is sort of looking to sort of find their own way now in the new era. And I think, this week, particularly in the 100, it's been quite exciting. I know there was a last ball 6 to win, or not last ball 6, but sort of close to last ball 6 the other night. I think that one of the main reasons that the 100 was sort of created, I think, was to bring in big crowds and introduce cricket to children and so on. And I mean, just from looking at the stadiums, they look packed, and I think the 100 seems to be going in the right direction. So I'm looking forward to getting into some of the details.
Yeah, so as you say, we'll pick out a few players. Sort of look at sort of the batting to begin with. Obviously, unsurprisingly, the likes of Phil Salt and Josh Buttler are up there after the first couple of games, but also interesting to see the form, as you mentioned, of Johnny Bairstow and Liam Livingstone, two players now who it seems England have moved on from, but they show they obviously still have the skill against very good bowling attacks. I mean, obviously Liam Livingstone took down Rashid Khan, who was one of the best T20 spinner in the world. Johnny Bairstow against a London Spirit attack, which had likes of Luke Wood, Jamie Overton, Liam Dawson, almost got them over the line single-handedly. But just interesting to see two players there who may still see the door open for an England return, but it's just whether England see that as well is a different matter.
Yeah, and to be honest, I personally feel that they both still have a chance to come back. I think, in Bairstow's case, I think a red ball return is definitely unlikely. I think, especially with how clear they've been with their batting order from 1 to 7, and Bairstow sort of want to be wicketkeeper, and given how well Jamie Smith has gone, I don't personally see him coming back in the red ball team necessarily. But in the white ball team, I think, given England are sort of, like I mentioned, in the sort of a new beginning, and Harry Brook is sort of trying to find his 11 sort of that he can bank on, I still think there are some positions there, especially in the top order, where Bairstow could potentially still find himself a place. I think, especially with a World Cup coming up, you sometimes want to lean on some of those senior players who have some World Cup experience, and Bairstow himself is a World Cup winner as well. So, especially in the opening position, I think Duckett is probably kind of a certainty for the time being at the top of the order, especially in one-day cricket. But I know they've trialled sort of Phil Salt and then Jamie Smith to varying degrees of success. And as we know, Bairstow, he played, he made a name for himself at the top of the order. So if Bairstow keeps scoring runs and knocking on that door, I personally still feel like Bairstow could have a chance, especially with the World Cup coming up, to maybe get sort of one last hurrah. And in terms of Livingston's situation, he offers a bit of both. Sort of, he might be competing with that sort of Jacob Bethel position potentially, which could be quite an interesting one. Sort of him, Bethel, and even someone like Rehan Ahmed, who could all kind of be vying for that sort of number 6, 7 kind of position, where you have someone to score some quick runs, but also bowl, potentially their full allocation of overs. Again, Livingston admittedly hasn't been so consistent in recent times. I know he had quite a lean IPL as well, and he was sort of signed as a big name player, and he didn't quite live up to that billing. But again, given just that sort of backdrop of England's white ball side being quite new and on a new journey, I still feel like both Bairstow and Livingston have a chance if they keep being consistent and sort of, knocking on the door. But what are your thoughts on sort of those two?
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I think, with Bairstow now, he's spent a little bit of time out of the team now, whereas Livingston only recently dropped, really. But Livingston, he's only 32 as well, so I mean, he's still got a number of years left, and we know what he's capable of. It just does seem England sort of moving on in the white ball. You see the sort of like Jamie Smith, Jacob Bethel, Will Jacks has been sort of reintegrated back into the side. I'm not sure if Bairstow will necessarily get back in, but with Livingston, it kind of depends how much really they trust Jacob Bethel's spin. We kind of saw it a bit in the final test at the Oval. It'd be interesting to see how he develops his spin, because that could be real crucial as kind of the backup to Adil Rashid if Liam Dawson isn't playing as well. But a name that you did mention there, I want to comment, is sort of Rehan Ahmed. Kind of feel like he fits the mould really of Baz Ball, and he's had to be. I mean, he's still only 20, to be fair, but he's had to be patient in terms of opportunities for England. He's been named in the squads for a few years now, but not really had the opportunity. But this year, particularly as a batter, up the order for Leicestershire at number 3, and then for the Trent Rockets as well, he's scored a couple of good knocks early on at number 3. So it'd be interesting to see if he'll be in the side moving forward, where they utilise him if he is.
I'm very curious to see how they handle Rehan Ahmed, because I think the last time he was involved with England, unless I'm mistaken, was when he was picked in that New Zealand squad for the tour away, which seemed like an unusual selection. And then they because in New Zealand with those conditions, and then they sort of seemed to move past him. But given that he seems to be almost reinventing himself as maybe a batter who bowls a bit of leg spin potentially, I'm really interested to see that story and how that unfolds.
Yeah, and it is, however important it is that he, becomes a very solid batter. You feel from England perspective, because Adil Rashid won't have too long left, that spin is a real important component that you feel that England are lacking a bit, because obviously Liam Dawson's getting towards the latter part of his career as well. So I guess it's a case of how much they sort of trust him, sort of similar with Jacob Bethel, who I think is only really more, you'd say, part-time spin, but it's really, I think, a case of how much they trust them to do the job as a spinner as well, because he would be really useful, someone who could bat pretty much anywhere in the batting order as well.
I agree. And Yeah, so many options potentially for the England white ball team.
If a couple of the England players that return from the Test series have struggled to get going a bit, sort of Ben Duckett, Joe Root, Jamie Smith. But it was good to see sort of Jofra Archer and Josh Tong have both been playing and performing well. Obviously, you know, there's no Chris Wokes, Brian Cars pulled out as well for fitness reasons. But good to see Jofra Archer continuing to sort of build up his fitness, if you will. But another bowler worth mentioning is Sonny Baker, the Manchester Originals. Sort of his name sort of floated around over the past year or so, but I feel like he's having a real breakout competition. Only he's taken 4 wickets, but he's not gone for many runs at all. And I think the beauty of franchise cricket is that you have a young bowler here who at Hampshire, there's a number of young bowlers. They're all touted to sort of play for England, like John Turner and Eddie Jack. But for him, with the Manchester Originals, you know, he's getting this opportunity now to train and learn from Josh Tong and obviously James Anderson as well, which will be a benefit for him.
Yeah, and I guess that's, like you said, that's the beauty of these franchise competitions. Is that for these young and up and coming players, the opportunities they get to train and watch and learn from these like greats or just seasoned veterans, I think is huge. And also just on him in particular, yeah, I think this last week gone by, it's the first time I've properly seen him bowl. And you know, his pace, pretty much everything was sort of that 87 miles per hour kind of bracket. He was, you know, hitting the pitch hard. He bowled that great opening spell to David Warner against the London Spirit, which I know David Warner has sort of retired and everything, but still to bowl to such an international class player, and he had him sort of playing and missing and not really knowing, you know, where the ball was going. I thought that was huge. And, you know, he seems to fit that mold that maybe England are looking for their pace bowling attack. You know, and the way he's bowling, if he can maintain that sort of good economy. You mentioned he had only picked up 4 wickets, but I don't believe he's gone for too many runs either. So I think, you know, if he can ally the two together and keep bowling at this good pace, you know, it may not be long until we see him in some of these England squads as well. Because, yeah, he looks like he's everything that this England side, this England setup are sort of looking for from their pace bowlers. So, yeah, again, really exciting to see another sort of young English bowler sort of come to the fore.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't quite have the point of difference that sort of Josh Hull had, sort of a tall left armer when he was sort of jumped his way up into the England squad. But obviously, with the England pace bowlers and sort of the injury record, I mean, if he can just keep going as he is, it wouldn't be a surprise if I think if he was named in a squad in the near future. Just finally, as well, obviously a big part of the 100 is the overseas players. Obviously, as you mentioned, David Warner, perhaps surprisingly, I think people might have thought he might not have as much to offer now, but he's had 2 very good innings and leading the run scoring charts. But there's been a few that have sort of struggled to get going. Sort of Steve Smith has shown glimpses. Kane Williamson's not really contributed too much to the bat. But a big one is Henrik Klassen of South Africa at Manchester Originals again. So he was a big coup, really. I think they wanted Nicholas Pooran, but Klassen, a very you know, one of the most destructive white ball batters in the world. But he has really struggled to get going, and it's an interesting one that I saw online. Obviously, he's one of these players who has retired from international cricket a little bit prematurely. And I saw the comparison with obviously Quinton de Kock, who sort of a similar thing, retired slightly earlier to focus on franchise opportunities. We're obviously seeing it increasingly now. Nicholas Pooran, as I mentioned, was another high-profile one at the age of 29. I just want to get your thoughts on that. Do you think sort of retiring from international cricket and sort of playing sort of franchise cricket only does impact these players?
I mean, it must do on some level, because I guess that continuity of high level training, week in, week out, is kind of gone to a degree. I know he might go from franchise to franchise, but sometimes there are gaps in the calendar before the next one pops up. And when you're training at that international level, I guess everything is just dialed up to 11. So you're always like, everything is sort of heightened, your skills, your senses, your match awareness. So I would imagine that it does have an effect. And I think, we've seen it in the IPL as well a little bit. Like someone like MS Dhoni, for example, he really only plays the IPL now. And you can see that he's a shadow of himself to sort of what he used to do for India when he was obviously training regularly and playing at the highest level. Sort of, we sometimes see glimpses of what he can do, but obviously it's not always as consistent. Now, I think in Klaasen's case, he's only very recently retired. So I think potentially it's just a case of maybe he's still getting used to some conditions and so on. And we might see him have like a breakthrough innings this coming week. But I imagine that it does have an effect on these players. And I think unless you're one of these like genetic freaks like AB de Villiers or someone who just, he can like only play franchise cricket, or just, you can come out of retirement like de Villiers has done and play in that sort of Legends League and so on and still smash hundreds. Unless you're sort of this like rare exception, I think this is a very natural thing. You see retired players try and make a fist of it in franchise competitions only, and it can be a bit hit and miss. But I think we know how good Klaasen is, and I think maybe in a week's time we might see him have his sort of first breakthrough innings. But I agree with you. I think it probably does have an effect on these players.
We will obviously keep discussing 100 as we go the next couple of weeks, but we'll sort of move on now, as we say, to turn our attention to the test format and the Ashes build-up. Obviously still a few months away, but after England's series with India, now obviously the next test they play obviously will be in Perth for that first Ashes test, and we'll begin with the top three for both sides. A real interesting area, because I feel like it's a point of vulnerability for both sides, and probably the area where Australia are less settled than England, really.
Yeah, I think. And so I was thinking about it the other day. I think since that 2010-11 campaign where England obviously won under Strauss and Andy Flower, I think since then England have probably fallen short in sort of two key areas when they've toured Australia, in my opinion anyway. That clarity of sort of playing personnel and who you're picking from 1 to 11 and their roles and responsibilities. And then obviously the quality of cricket you play as the 5 tests progress and sort of reacting to the situations. I think the last time an England side had any kind of clarity on the playing personnel was probably that 2010-11 tour, like in terms of an Ashes series. I think since then, we've seen tours where they turn up and they're playing, it's Cook, Mark Stoneman, and James Vince sort of one tour, and then a year later it's Jason Roy, Rory Burns, Joe Denley, and then the last tour to Australia, it was they were like kind of picking at the last minute from Hasib Hamid, Zach Crawley. Dominic Sibley, I think, was left out at the last minute, even though he had played quite a couple of years leading up to that. There's just been so much muddle and so much kind of confusion. And they sort of, day one of the first Ashes test, they play sort of a top order that have probably never played together before. Whereas this time going into it, it's probably the first time since 2010-11 that England at least have checked that box in terms of clarity of playing personnel. And, regardless of what we and others might say about, Zach Crawley's inconsistency and Ollie Pope's inconsistency, I think we're all at least very clear that Crawley, Duckett and Pope are going to turn up. Whereas on the flip side for Australia, like you mentioned, they have, like, if you ask me personally, who is their top three at the moment, I do think they're going to stick with Usman Khawaja. I think he has done enough over a long period of time to warrant a place, even though he's been a little bit quiet recently. But those other two positions seem to be completely up in the air. I think they were hoping Sam Constas would maybe fire a bit more than just that one MCG innings where he ramped Bumrah, but he hasn't quite kind of backed that up. They tried Marnus Labuschagne and then kind of moved on from him. And I think they have a sort of a Sheffield Shield round coming up where they're hoping to maybe make their final decisions based on that. So, based on all that, funnily enough, for the first time, I think you would feel more comfortable being in England's camp, at least from that clarity of playing personnel. Now, the other part of it is obviously how they play on the Australian pitches, which I think will be far more bowler friendly than what we've been seeing England play on for a while now. I think, admittedly, Bazball and Crawley and Duckett and Pope have thrived on the whole on sort of these batter-friendly wickets, in my opinion, at least, or in like Pakistan where the pitches have been batter-friendly. So, how that kind of works for them in Australia, sort of will they be able to, play those shots and keep the scoreboard ticking as freely when the pitches do a bit more, at least based on what we've seen in Australia in the last few years. They've really juiced up the pitches, probably to cater to their bowling attack, which to me is sort of the best well-rounded bowling attack in world cricket. So it'll be interesting to see if, even though England have settled top three, will they be able to perform as they have been doing on those juicier pitches. But in contrast, Australia at the moment probably aren't even sure what their top three are. But I guess from Australia's perspective, it's one of sort of their blueprint recently has been try and couple together just enough runs somehow for their bowling attack to kind of bail them out. And it'll be interesting to see if that works sort of one more time. But I think, at the moment, I think England supporters should be quietly confident and content that they at least have some clarity with that top three, which you couldn't say has been the case sort of in the previous Ashes tours since 2010-11. But I wanted to get your thoughts on that as well, because it's an interesting one, that top three, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I think, as you say, people constantly, us included, talking about sort of Zach Crawley and Ollie Pope's form. But I think we did see again in the India series. I think this was a frustrating thing because you can see what they're capable of and why they are in the team. Particularly Crawley with that opening partnership with Duckett. It can really put the pressure on the bowlers going at sort of 4 or 5 and over if they can get it right. He just couldn't, kick on and get that big score. And sort of same with Ollie Pope. We're sort of seeing similar patterns that he can start series well. He got obviously a century in the first test, and then his form kind of dwindles as longer series go on. But like I say, it's easier to say who shouldn't be in the team, but then you say who would come in to replace them. I mean, I don't remember England selecting a backup opener in the squad for a long time now. Dan Lawrence did it last summer when Crawley was injured. Obviously, that's not his role. That's not a position he does often. Obviously, we had Bethel out in New Zealand at number 3 who did well, but then struggled in that final test against India. And it's a big ask to sort of bring a young person in for an away Ashes series. But I think if you look at the alternatives, like we've mentioned, Rayan Ahmed has been batting well at 3. People will say, he'd be an exciting pick, he deserves it. But, to put him at number 3 for an away Ashes series is a huge ask. And I think that is asking for trouble as well. So with the openers, there's obviously the young lad Ben McKinney at Durham, who a lot of people have talked about, but sort of similar problem there with a lad on debut. You've got sort of experienced players like Hasib Hamid, Dom Sibley, who have found form again, but you don't feel they really sort of fit in this Bazball mantra. Like you say, you don't want to disrupt what has been a partnership between Crawley and Duckett that might not always come off, but when it does, it really does flourish.
Yeah, and I was actually looking at some of the stats with Crawley and Duckett. So obviously Crawley individually as an opener, I think averages sort of 30.8 or something, and Duckett as an opener averages, I think, 43. But together they average 46. So obviously where they individually might struggle on occasion, maybe Crawley slightly more so, together something works for them when they come together, and the average as a partnership is greater than both of their individual ones. So, like you say, I think at this stage, and given that they've been building up to this Ashes, and these two have been batting together for 3 years now, I certainly am not advocating that they try and change anything now. I think if they do that, which they clearly want, Stokes and Key are very you can tell that they know what they want and they're going to stick with it, regardless of the outside noise. But, I don't see them changing it, and nor should they. I think these top three deserve to play the Ashes really in its entirety. I think if they've stuck with them for 3 years now, through the ups and downs, I think one last, big series, give them the full series. I'm sure they want to back that full Bazball vision one last time for this Ashes series. And, that starts with the top three. And so, like you say, it's for some of those young guys that you mentioned that could potentially play in the future. I think, it's probably still a bit too early for them. I think like Rehan Ahmed, he might fit that Bazball mold, but I think it's still a bit kind of premature. I think they will get their time probably after the Ashes. But yeah, for now, I hope England stick with this top three, give them the full series, and see how it goes.
And Pope is obviously, the vice captain as well. So they clearly think highly of him for his role in the side, not just his batting as well. But yeah, so if we do move on to Australia now, you kind of touched upon it a little earlier. Sort of for their series in West Indies, which was a real struggle for the batters for both sides. They had Usman Khawaja, Sam Constas, and Cam Green. Like I say, Usman Khawaja, 38 now. He seems like he will be a lock for the Ashes, but that is someone that they're going to have to replace in the near future anyway. Sam Constas is an interesting one because first on the scene against India in very sort of Bazball style, and then played in didn't play in the Sri Lanka series. I think he returned home from that. Then he obviously wasn't picked in the World Test Championship final. But then he did come back in against West Indies, but only averaged, I think it was 8 or something for the 3-match series. So that's an interesting dilemma there for Australia, whether to back him. Because again, as we say with England, there's not loads of alternatives there.
I agree with you. I think Usman Khawaja, I think, will be a lock. He's done so much for them for now 4 years since he returned to the side in the last home Ashes series for them. And like you said, the pitches in West Indies were very hard for batting. I think pretty much everyone struggled. There were a couple of 60s here and there from, I think, Bo Webster and Steve Smith, but in general, everyone kind of uniformly struggled. So I think it's a bit hard to read into that too much, I think, personally. I think Constas is an interesting one. I think they will probably play him. I think, he did okay last time Australia had a home series. Maybe in home comforts, he might sort of find something again. And he might be that kind of ideal person to maybe try and rattle England and sort of give them something else to think about. For me, the main kind of conundrum is probably that number 3 position. And Australia have had a bit of a funny kind of, with their top 3 in general, they've had a bit of a funny relationship with these top 3 since David Warner retired. Obviously, we saw Steve Smith try his hand at opening first. And it seemed like this setup kind of prefer kind of going down the route of we pick the best 7 batters in the country, regardless of position. We just pick the best 7, and we'll try and sort of fudge people in certain positions. It's sometimes felt a bit like that. So we saw Smith try open. It didn't quite work out. He's now gone back to 4. We saw in the World Test Championship Marnus try and open for that one test, and then he sort of has been moved on for now, at least. And now they seem to move Cameron Green from number 6 to number 3. And, they seem very kind of happy to sort of announce that he's a long-term number 3 prospect for us. But, he did quite well at number 6. But I guess for Australia, Bo Webster has come in at number 6 and has been, for me, probably more consistent than Cam Green was at number 6. So he's sort of made himself kind of undroppable. And Green probably can't fit in 4 or 5 because Smith and Travis Head are there, who are bankers. So then you're kind of left with, because they back Green so much and they want him in the side somewhere, he's kind of been pushed into that number 3 position. So it's hard to see how that will go long term. Again, judging him on that West Indies series, I think is a bit harsh because it was very, the pitches were sort of very tough to bat on. I think he showed in a couple of innings he was maybe finding his feet a little bit, but it'll be interesting to see how he goes in the Ashes across the 5 tests.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I'm not sure, because obviously Bo Webster came in originally because Cam Green was obviously had a long-term injury. But I don't think Cam Green has been back bowling yet. It'd be interesting if come the Ashes this winter. If he is, then they certainly have another seamer as well. But like I say, Bo Webster's come in and done a very solid job. So that is a decision for them to make. Marnus Labuschagne is an interesting one because he is the number 1 ranked batter not so long ago, but he's just his form's kind of just dipped massively at the moment. And I'd say he was trialled to open in that World Test Championship final, which didn't really work, and then he didn't play in the Caribbean as well. So it'd be interesting to see if you feel like the only chance he has of getting in the team is back up to open, which I'm not sure if that does really suit him.
Yeah, and I think he even admitted that if that's the only place I can bat, I'll try and make the most of it. It seems like they don't want to move away from him too quickly. I think even though he didn't play in the West Indies, they still took him in that squad to keep him around the environment as is done nowadays. And sort of, I think there were reports that he was training on specific things with the batting coach and trying to work out certain things. So I still think they see Marnus as their future in that top 3 somewhere. But whether opening is that position, only time will tell. But yeah, we'll see. He's one of those players. He offers, I think, a bit more than just the batting in the field. He can often turn games. That energy, even though it sometimes rubs people up the wrong way, some of that energy and some of the things that gets picked up on the stump mic. I think that energy and that sort of exuberance he brings on the field when they're bowling and fielding, I think has helped turn games as well. So for all those reasons, I think Marnus will play in the Ashes. Where in that top 3, it'll be interesting to see if they stick with Cam Green for the whole 5 tests at number 3, if he gets off to a kind of a rough start. But yeah, I do see a future still for Marnus. It's just sort of how they use him.
Yeah, they do have sort of Marcus Harris, obviously, he's been in great form for Lancashire over in the County Championship. Cameron Bancroft as well, whether they will go back to him again is unlikely. But it's interesting with Australia because, and we'll touch on this I think more when we look at the bowling attack, that you see England going through a bit of a transition period at the moment with sort of new players in the team. Australia got a very strong core of players, but I think down the line it'd be interesting to see how they shape up, because we've got a lot of players sort of coming towards the latter stage of the career, and we've not seen, other than sort of Cam Green, as you say, there's not too many young players who have sort of got the opportunity in the side. So I think they're going to be interested to see how their transition period in the next couple of years. Probably starting with
Yeah,
the top three as well.
yeah, and they've sort of been quite a closed shop as well with their team. It's sort of, I think Cummins has made it quite clear that we know our best 11 when everyone is fit, and regardless of how well sort of potential newcomers and like young up and comers are doing, they like to very much stick with their preferred 11. So yeah, it has been hard to sort of get a glance at some of these new potential, like the next generation of players. I think Sam Constas and Cameron Green are probably the only two that have kind of come in. Scott Boland, he's sort of mid-30s or something, so he doesn't necessarily fall into that category. But the fact that even someone like him can't make the first 11, even though at times he has been Australia's best bowler, shows sort of how much of a close shot they have become. But you're right. I think after the series, sort of the rumors that have been going on for a while are sort of a lot of them are going to potentially retire because they're all at that age now. And I know, for both England and Australia, the Ashes sort of a great place to sort of bow out. So it will be interesting to see sort of their next generation of players. The only thing is, Australia being Australia, and I know here we don't like to admit it too much, but they always find a way of producing just good cricket teams and competitive cricket teams, even if the names on the team sheet aren't sort of big or well known. So I still feel like Australia will find a way to be competitive on the international scene moving forward. But obviously, it will take some time for them to build up to a team that is this quality, which they sort of built towards this over the last 4 or 5 years. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see sort of that transition period, how long it lasts, because they had a bit of a transition period when sort of McGrath and Langer and Warne retired, obviously all at once, and then Gilchrist and Hayden went. And it took them sort of 4 or 5 years to kind of find a new DNA, competitive DNA again. So I'm sure they'll go through a similar period. But again, Australia being Australia, I feel like they will somehow find a way of producing good teams sort of down the road.
Just finally touch on a bit more of a wider point as we are talking about the top three. It's that number three position in general. It's a really interesting one in world cricket. So you feel like going back sort of 10, 20 years, we had such top number threes in world cricket. Now there's a bit of a trend where sort of the leading batters seem to prefer that number 4 spot.
Yeah.
Obviously, Joe Root, Steve Smith, Virat Kohli. It's just interesting with the number 3 position, such a crucial role in the batting lineup. But England have obviously, with Ollie Pope, we'll talk about his position. Australia sort of trialing Cam Green. There's another example of South Africa in that World Test Championship final, had Vian Mulder. And we certainly know he came back from that Zimbabwe test recently. But again, it's just interesting. I don't know if it's just the caliber of players in the modern age, or what is it about that number 3 that seems teams struggling really in international cricket to nail down that position.
Yeah, and maybe it's just like a moving with the times kind of thing, but potentially like I know you and I probably grew up in that era where sort of certain positions were sort of revered and coveted, and like you needed to have trained for that position specifically and played all your cricket at that position to even be considered in that same position for the national team. I guess now it's more about sort of, and I don't want to use this word to sort of like belittle sort of anything, but like sort of it's sort of vibes based kind of selections now. It's more sort of the personality and the bigger vision of a team, as opposed to we want the best player for this position. It's sort of we like what this player can offer in sort of tough moments. Where can we fit him in the side around sort of other key players? And sometimes that might mean that it's that number 3 position. Sometimes it might mean that opening batter position, which I guess Australia are sort of experiencing now with sort of their conundrum. So, it might be a moving with the times type thing potentially that sort of people out of our age and older might just need to come to terms with. But also, you make a good point. It might be a caliber thing as well. I think with all the T20 cricket, and I know this might be an easy sort of reason to give, but with all the T20 cricket and franchise stuff being played, potentially techniques have been diminishing, sort of in that the top three batters. So sometimes you're not getting that sort of high quality that maybe we used to get. Also, I think pitches nowadays around the world are a bit harder to bat on. It seems like, it's either, okay, maybe not in England recently where it's been batter friendly, but sort of you see a lot more kind of grassy wickets in sort of South Africa, Australia. In Asia, you see a lot more sort of spin friendly wickets. So maybe batters just don't get that opportunity to bat long in sort of domestic cricket, and even if they get a go at international cricket, just to sort of find that cadence and score those bulk runs. So maybe all those things kind of feed into it. And yeah, maybe it's just like a different era of Test cricket that we just need to kind of sort of come to terms with. And maybe in time we'll get the next sort of generational number 3 that sort of breaks all these records again. But maybe for the time being, it seems like those kind of players, like you say, want to bat in that 4-5 position. And maybe the top 3, if they can find some kind of a workable formula to sort of get some kind of a base or a platform for that number 4-5 and beyond to score the runs. It seems teams prefer going down that route. But like you say, we may see in time like another great number 3 batter, but it doesn't seem like that's in vogue at the moment.
Yeah, and I didn't mention India as well, because that was their kind of problem position in the Test series, really, with sort of Syed Sudas and Karan Neer. That was sort of the one position that they did struggle as well. So yes, that is all the time we have for this week. Next week we will look at sort of the middle order for both sides, which do look very strong, and we'll also keep up to date with what's happening in the 100 as well. So thank you once again, Mohan, for your input.
Cheers, Dom. Appreciate it.
And and please subscribe to the Cricket Paper. Thank you.